Welcome back, WNST, to the lowly Chicago Bears around here. Luke will be on the backfields in Owings Mills getting ready for the game. We are both up late watching Major League Baseball and even the histrionics of Justin Turner hitting walk-offs for the Dodgers amidst all the football action. And there was a football game late on Sunday night. And a shocker, much like there were shockers throughout the league. Luke, I don't know that anybody's shocked that the Ravens lost to the Bears the way they did. I mean, if you go back and roll back the Wayback Clock to 2 weeks ago in Pittsburgh and 3 weeks ago in Wembley, they have looked like a bad football team at other points. But around the league, the Falcons losing at home, the Broncos losing at home to a winless New York Giants team, Aaron Rodgers going down, the Patriots continuing their struggle. I don't know how people bet on this league. I say that every week, but I mean, other than the Browns losing and losing big, I don't know what you can count on in this league, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost getting to the point where we keep talking about these surprises and the league's weird and, it's unpredictable and it's week to week. It gets to a point where we say, why are we surprised anymore? I mean, I'll admit, I didn't think the Ravens were going to lose to the Bears. I picked them to win by, I think, 13 points in my official prediction. But that said, the one thing that I said, or the two things that I said that would happen if they were going to get beat, ended up happening. They turned the ball over, and they gave up a bunch of yards on the ground. So it just, we can keep using all these adjectives to describe it, and I just keep coming back to mediocrity. I mean, all these teams are just okay, and when you have a bunch of okay teams, you end up getting a bunch of results that don't make any sense. So, I mean, even Kansas City, who we were, not necessarily us, but many people were anointing them as, the best team in football and going to win or go to the Super Bowl, be the representative from the AFC, and they lose to a Pittsburgh team that, let's face it, hasn't looked all that good so far this season.
And jammed the ball down their throats defensively. It wasn't an accident. Roethlisberger threw for 250, Bell runs for 180, Antonio Brown still running around. I mean, that was one of those, well, you guys go ahead and win your 13 games. We'll win 10 or 11, and if we have to come here and see you in January, you're not going to like that much.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, and I don't know if that's good for the league or not. I know, we talk about the idea of parity, but is that really a term you use to cloak mediocrity? And I'm not sure mediocrity is the best thing.
Yeah, if everybody's 6-6 on Thanksgiving, is that good? I don't know, but I mean, we're sort of heading in that direction, though, aren't we?
We are, but the problem is, look at the star power that we've lost to injuries. And I'm not talking about the Ravens. Just look at the league. I mean, Aaron Rodgers goes down. Last week it was J.J. Watt and Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, the Zeke Elliott thing, I mean, regardless of that being self-inflicted or the league's handling of it, he's going to be serving six games of a suspension at some point, whether it's now or sometime in the future. So you look at that, all those teams hovering around 500, give or take a game, and some of the star power that you're losing as a league, I'm not sure that's a good thing. So I'm sure Ravens fans look at that Packers, that trip to Lambeau now and say, well, that's a winnable game now, and probably weren't looking at that as a winnable game prior to Sunday. But again, you ask if that's what's best for the league amidst everything else going on that's gone on beyond the field. And you kind of just have a really muddled picture right now. As you said, other than the Cleveland Browns being 0-6 and terrible, there's not a whole lot else that is really crystallized to this point other than a whole lot of mediocre teams.
Well, here come the Minnesota Vikings, and you talk about things that could happen in a game. I mean, middle of the second quarter, Jeff Moeller behind me elbows me up at 5:13 and says, hey, Rodgers getting carted off right now. And I looked up and I said, well, that certainly changes the prospects of the Ravens' visit there. I think it changes the prospects for everything that's going to go on in the NFC. And, based on the fact that we don't think New England's infallible this year, it still is sitting there no matter how poorly you play, that 9 wins might get you into the tournament. And certainly if you're the Ravens looking at this Minnesota trip here this week, you're seeing a team that you kind of sort of want to be. They're playing on their third quarterback, their second running back, third if you count Adrian Peterson, who's now on his third team and running around for 140 yards yesterday, running around with the Arizona Cardinals now. This is a different version of the Vikings team, and I don't know that any franchise, maybe Houston as well, when you consider what they've done with the quarterback and what they've done without Merciless and Watt at this point, but the resiliency of other teams to bunker down, hunker down, and win a game, much like the Ravens did in Oakland last week. We weren't talking about Brandon Williams and Brent Urban and Marshall Yonda last week in Oakland. We were talking about winning. Minnesota's not talking about that right now after a 2-touchdown win over their rival, and now they're in the catbird's position to take this division. The Ravens come in there with a lot to prove this week against Case Keenum, who came out of a tree and beat him 3 years ago, man.
Well, he hardly did anything in that game. Let's remember that. But he's playing pretty well, considering, as you mentioned. I mean, this is a guy that was on the street a couple years ago. You look at his numbers. I mean, he's been quite respectable. They certainly, despite the loss of Dalvin Cook, that team does have some decent weapons in the passing game. I mean, Kyle Rudolph's a good tight end. Adam Thielen's been good for them. I mean, Stephon Diggs, when healthy, certainly we know what kind of talent he is. Painfully, I guess, if you look at it from a standpoint of the Ravens could have drafted him a couple different times and decided not to.
And Ravens got burned by a couple of Baltimore kids on Sunday, in addition to a Maryland kid there, right?
Yeah. He definitely doesn't feel good in that regard. But, I mean, this is a Vikings team that despite the uncertainty with Sam Bradford, and, I mean, some of the reports you heard about him over the weekend, they're talking about this being career-threatening with his knee, that it's in bad shape. It sounds I haven't seen the exact medical details, but it sounds like more of a degenerative thing than anything else when you consider some of the injuries he's had to that part of the body over the course of his career. But it's a Vikings team that, they surely benefited from knocking out Aaron Rodgers, but they're 4-2. They're 3-1 at home. They've certainly benefited from playing that many games in their home building to this point. But the Ravens are going to have their hands full, and Case Keenum or not. That's an offense that has been able to do some things. They've been pretty stout defensively. So the Ravens, they're going to have to bring their A game in a similar way to what they were able to do in Oakland last week. You would think it's going to have to take a pretty similar effort. I think when you lose to a rookie quarterback at home and a team that was 1-4 in your home stadium, all bets are off. There's no more looking past team. I think everyone got a good lesson in that. The Ravens, the media, and the fans on Sunday with what happened against the Bears. So you got to be able to go to Minnesota and play much sharper football if they want to have a chance of winning a road game, because that's a team, despite everything they've gone through, they've managed to remain resilient and win some football games.
I know there was some palpable disappointment on your side of the fence when your sister decided to marry a Philadelphia Eagles fan, but they're playing great football right now, and all hats off to Jimmy Schwartz, and they got the extra rest coming up for a Redskin game. They have now moved to the top of the power rankings, and certainly having a quarterback, having a healthy quarterback, having a wide receiver in Aguilar and some other players start to develop and start to play better. The Eagles are the story of the NFL this week, at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, they've been really good, and you just said it. I mean, Carson Wentz gets the attention, and rightfully so, and he's the quarterback, and you understand that. But the other aspects of that team have really come through. They've been pretty well rounded. I mean, they've been very good offensively. Defensively, I think they've improved quite a bit from last year. It's just that they go to Carolina on a short week. I mean, all we hear about is these Thursday night games. We all talk about how bad they are. We talk about how it puts the road team at a competitive disadvantage. And they go to Charlotte playing one of the consensus best teams in the NFC to this point. And they really, they handled them. So, I mean, this is an Eagles team that, you mentioned my brother-in-law. I was talking to him about the Eagles a couple weeks ago, and he said, yeah, it's been good, but we haven't really had that signature win just yet. You look at our schedule, they haven't really played too many great teams yet, or too many teams that you expected to be all that good. Well, they changed that narrative on Thursday night, and just amazing to see what Carson Wentz has done, to see what Watson's done to this point, and think that the Cleveland Browns passed on both of those guys. Just amazing. But, this is an Eagles team that, and you mentioned Nelson Aguilar, someone who was spoken of in very similar terms to Rashad Perriman as early as the preseason. And you see that he's been a much bigger part of their offense and has been quite successful and doesn't look like a bust anymore. I guess if you're a Ravens fan, that's what you point to and try to hold out some hope from Rashad Perriman, but two 2015 first-round receivers going in very distinct opposite directions at this point.
Luke Jones and I going around the National Football League here between week 6 and 7 as we get ready for the weekend. Of course, Luke and I will be watching baseball and talking some baseball for you as well. If you're out on Twitter, out on social media, we're up all night with all things Cubs and Dodgers and Yankees and Astros and hating on some Yankees around here as well. You mentioned signature win, right? Last week, the Ravens get on the plane, fly home 3,000 miles into the middle of the night on Sunday. You and I are here blabbering about, hey, man, road win in Oakland. I know backup quarterback, all that stuff, but that is a signature win to go 3,000 miles and sort of kind of save your season and put the ball back in the right side. Boy, the Oakland Raiders now, that's not looking like a quality team. And strangely enough, the Cincinnati win in week 1, when we look, Cincinnati might win 3 or 4 games, that's starting to smell a little better from the Ravens' perspective. But Oakland's got their hands full now on Thursday night, mired in this losing streak. Kansas City coming in on short rest with a little RA of their own after having lost to the Steelers at home. This is a Thursday night game, and I know we'll be watching baseball as well on Thursday night, but this is going to be one worth watching. I mean, someone has to emerge as a leader in the AFC. It's not going to be the Oakland Raiders right now, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it. I mean, for as much as we kind of talked about that being a big win, and, I mean, E.J. Manuel was playing. We get that. But Derek Carr was back on Sunday, and I'm not sure how much he's still feeling that back injury, which just sounds so painful. And the idea that he's back in 2 weeks.
It looks painful.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that he's back in 2 weeks and wanted to play so badly against the Ravens, but they scored 16 points at home against the Chargers. I mean, really? So you're right. I mean, you look at that one and you say, okay, maybe that one's not as impressive. You mentioned Cincinnati. Well, keep in mind they did fire their offensive coordinator, about 6 calendar days into the regular season when you consider that they had that Thursday night game that they lost after they were shut out by the Ravens. So, but that one looks a little bit better. The Raiders one looks not as impressive, although the way this team has played on the road over the last 4 or 5 years, I don't think you snub your nose or turn your nose at any road win. But it just, again, it speaks to the volatility of this league. Every time you think you figure things out and you say, okay, that's a contender, that's a contender, that's a contender, then it all changes. And, if you look at the Raiders, maybe there's, the football gods, there's some karma at work with them announcing they were bolting Oakland and going to play there for a couple more years, which I think is still such a weird situation. But that's another discussion for another day. But
come on, not as weird as the Los Angeles Chargers being called San Diego by every announcer in the country and, playing games in a side. The league really is sideways. I mean, the stadiums are empty. People are booing not showing up. People are booing the teams. Hey, this is an upside-down time, I think, all around for the league. I mean, look, Goodell's getting together this week with all the owners, and they're trying to figure out the knee thing. Kaepernick doesn't have a job. The Packers don't have a quarterback. I mean, every week we're going to be talking about everything other than what's going on the field, and what's going on in the field, quite frankly, is a lot of bad stuff right now with injuries and stars and mediocrity and bad football and just down the line. This is and jurisprudence and sports and politics intersecting. I mean, I don't know that the games on the field feel as important as everything else that's going on around it, because there's certainly as much noise between Monday and Sunday as there is on a Sunday afternoon for the games themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's where you're seeing a lot of people, regardless of the anthem protest itself, but just all the other noise. And let's face it, I mean, this isn't the first year the league has had a lot of noise off the field. I mean, that's just not realistic to remember it that way. But you think back to where this league was 5-6 years ago. I mean, it just felt like they were Teflon, but you look at what's happened then. I mean, the Ray Rice thing, and it's just there's so much that's happened. And
they've made a lot of mistakes. I mean, they really made a mistake on this Kaepernick thing all the way around from last year to this year. This thing started when Obama was in office. You know what I mean? Like, this is not a Republican-Democratic issue. This is a black-white issue, and this is a right-wrong issue, and this isn't a freedom of expression. There's a lot of issues going. This is thick because it is thick. It's not pretend thick. It's real thick.
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, your consumers, I think many of them have spoken that they use this as an escape. You and I talk about this because it's our livelihood. I mean, certainly we love it. Certainly we enjoy football. Certainly, deep roots here in Baltimore. But ultimately, most people that consume the NFL, they don't want to hear about the off-field stuff. And, and you can judge that and say they're right or wrong, or they're on the right side or the wrong side of history, or however you want to view it. But the reality is, you do have a lot of people that are tuning out. I mean, I think you look at the number of empty seats that we saw for the Pittsburgh game, more so than normal in a Ravens-Steelers game 2 weeks ago. And I saw, even though I'm not sitting there in the press box counting fans in seats, I know a lot of my friends who go to games were commenting on it and taking pictures. And you saw how empty the upper deck was. And I'm not even talking about fans just leaving early because the Ravens were down 2 scores late. We're seeing it in Baltimore, and it's a reality elsewhere. I mean, people, a certain segment of people anyway, again, whether you agree with how they're handling it or not, they don't consume the NFL for everything else to be caught up in that. That's their escape. That's their leisure activity, and when that line starts to be blurred and blurred and blurred some more to the point where the line doesn't exist anymore, there are a lot of people piecing out. Now, am I convinced that that's a permanent checkout? Am I convinced that that's a permanent boycott, if you want to call it that? No, but they're certainly feeling the effects now, and they need to figure this out. And I think this week when the league and the PA comes together, they got to figure out something here. I mean, there's, and I've talked about this with you, going back specifically to the taking of the knee. At some point, you hope that gesture, that protest, that message turns into some good and turns into the league and the players partnering to have some more initiatives in these local communities. And we saw this past week the Ravens did some talking to local kids with police. We need to see more of that, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't spur any action, then taking a knee is, it's just an empty gesture if it doesn't result in any good. So, the league can go a long way this week in trying to bridge that gap, trying to come up with a resolution, and, hopefully, I'm not saying you appease your fans, but, well, they're all in it together as far as not wanting to damage the brand to the point where they're all losing money. And certainly that's in the back of their minds, probably not even in the back of their minds, but in the front of their minds, if we're being honest. So, can they come up with some solutions that helps them from an image standpoint with their league, with their consumers, and also, can they do some good here? For these players who have decided to deliver a message, stand up for what they believe, can it result in some positive things being done, and can some good come out of this, despite how ugly it's been in a variety of ways over the last few weeks specifically.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. We were watching baseball. We're talking football, and obviously the Ravens going out to Minnesota this week, then the short rest against Miami. Miami even, Jay Cutler got up and bit Matt Ryan on Sunday afternoon, so not even the Dolphins are a pushover at this point. But, you look at the way this thing's played out for Nashville, for Green Bay, for some of the remaining road trips. I know the Ravens got to get their own house in order. We'll be talking about that all week, but, there are no giants that they have to go and face. They got to go up to Pittsburgh and play, but the Green Bay trip was the one you were looking at and saying, wow, that's the one that they can't win or would really have a hard time winning. Look, they're going to have a hard time winning every week based on what we saw on Sunday and what we saw against the Steelers and over in Wembley. But that being said, because there's no giant here, I don't think that they're incapable of going out and beating Case Keenum in Minnesota this week. But that being said, there's a lot of work to be done around here, and I have no idea who's going to catch the ball, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just comes down to consistency at this point, and it really does become a situation where you need to take care of your own house. And that sounds so cliche because we say that every year. I mean, you can try to break down the schedule as much as you want. You break it down when it comes out in late April. You break it down again in the preseason. You break it down again at after the first quarter of the season. You break it down again at the bye. But ultimately, it comes down to how well equipped are you to win football games. And I agree with you from a standpoint of I don't think there's a single game on this schedule now where I say the Ravens cannot win. Maybe the Sunday night game in Pittsburgh in December. Who knows? I mean, for that to happen, the Steelers are going to have to do a lot more like what they did against Kansas City on Sunday because they've looked very mediocre for most of this season. But that said, I'm also looking at this Ravens team right now, and I see no reason to think that they can run off a stretch of winning 5 out of 6 or winning 4 out of 5 or reeling off 3 or 4 wins in a row at this point. I mean, we were looking at this stretch that began on Sunday against the Bears, and you're saying, oh, okay, Chicago, rookie quarterback. Minnesota, injuries at quarterback. Miami, Jay Cutler, enough said. Tennessee, Marcus Mariota dealing with an injury and probably going to be back, but you never know what's going to happen between now and then. You're looking at that and saying, man, this is a golden opportunity for this team to win 3 out of 4. And if you looked at those 4 games, this Bears game, okay, maybe the Miami game, maybe because it's on a short week, you'd say, okay, that looks like possibly the easiest, most winnable game of those 4. But certainly you would have put this one in a more favorable light than trying to go to Minnesota or Tennessee. And they needed 2 special team scores just to get to overtime. So as much as the schedule does look very manageable, and there isn't really a game that you look to other than maybe at Pittsburgh and say the Ravens, I don't really like their chances whatsoever in that game. I just look at how they've played now 3 of the last 4 weeks, and you look at who they've beaten. Okay, they beat Cincinnati week 1. We've already talked about the fact that their offense was such a mess that they fired their coordinator 1 week into the season. They beat Deshaun Kaiser, who's since been benched, and they beat E.J. Manuel, who's a backup quarterback. You look at all that and say, okay, I think there's a compelling argument that the Ravens could win any of these games, but you know what? There's a very compelling argument that they could lose any of those games too. So what does that add up to? Probably somewhere in the vicinity of what they are right now, 3-3, a 500 team, until we see some major reasons why to change our thinking. Yeah, they're going to get Brandon Williams back. I think that's going to help their defense immensely. Am I convinced that this is a great defense with him? No. It's certainly better than it's been. Offensively, let's face it, they weren't exactly clicking with Jeremy Maclin, so I'm not sure what you look to right now offensively to have any reason for hope that there's going to be any meaningful improvement. Yeah, they can put together some nice games. They did it last year. Keep in mind that Miami game, everyone thought that was such a breaking point for them, and then we saw the same offensive issues rear their head in the final month of the season. I mean, it's just people can talk about firing Marty Morningwig. Could they replace him with Greg Roman? Sure, they could. Do I think that would really help? No. So, I mean, it's just, it is what it is at this point. And if you're going to ask me if I think that they're going to get much better on the offensive side of the ball, we've talked about the running game after Sunday's game. They have a pretty solid running game. I don't know if the ceiling gets much better than what they've done because of the issues on the offensive line, because of the fact that they don't have an elite running back. I think that running game's probably as good or close to as good as it's going to get. This passing game is not very good. Certainly not good. Hasn't been very good even with Jeremy Maclin, and we saw without him on Sunday, it was completely dysfunctional. And my thoughts on that. That's a long time coming, and that starts at the top with Ozzie Newsome, with wide receivers being just the bane of his existence as far as not being able to develop and find them consistently, other than finding a veteran Band-Aid from time to time.
All right, Week 7 upon us, Week 6 in the books, plenty of baseball. I'll be watching some hockey around here this week, and we at least have good LCS action and big teams and big markets and big games and big stars ahead. You can find Luke out on those backfields in Owings Mills and stay abreast of all things that happen with us out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and Instagram. And, of course, the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault is there for you 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox. You can read all of Luke's works there as well. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Friday is my big day. I'm going into the Dundalk High Hall of Fame. We're having an after party at Costas Crab House. Beer, crabs, crab cakes, pit beef, whatever you're into. Some great music. We'd love to see your face in the place on Friday night, probably after 6:30 or 7 o'clock. We'll be over there kind of early. I'll be cracking some crabs. Hope to see you on Friday as we celebrate. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me anytime, anywhere. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.